Nobody likes to think about the end. We scroll past the headlines. We change the subject at dinner. We tell ourselves it's fine. It's always been this way. People have always predicted catastrophe and been wrong. We bury the unease under Netflix and noise and the comfortable assumption that tomorrow will look more or less like today. But here's what nobody is telling you. There is a book, an ancient book, written by multiple authors across 15 centuries on 3 different continents. And inside that book is a list, a specific, detailed, historically verifiable list of events that would signal the approach of the end of human history as we know it. Not vague poetic metaphors, not symbols open to interpretation, specific, concrete, documented. And as of today, 6 of the 7 things on that list have already happened, some of them within the last 100 years, some of them within the last decade. And the 7th is unfolding right now in real time on your news feed, whether you recognize it or not. I am not here to scare you. Fear is cheap, and I am not selling it. What I am here to do is show you something that took me a long time to be able to see clearly. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand what these 7 things actually are and what they actually mean, you will never look at the world the same way again. Stay with me because what I am about to show you is not opinion. It is not speculation. It is not the raving of someone standing on a street corner with a cardboard sign. It is history. It is archaeology. It is documented fact layered on top of documented fact until the weight of evidence becomes something that cannot be dismissed by any honest mind regardless of what that mind believes about God. Let us begin. The first sign is the one that most people either do not know about or dramatically underestimate. In the book of Ezekiel, written approximately 2,600 years ago, the prophet describes in extraordinary detail the restoration of a nation that at the time of his writing had already been destroyed. The people scattered, the land occupied by others. By every historical measure, this nation was finished, gone, the kind of gone that does not come back. Ezekiel writes that God would gather this people from among all the nations where they had been scattered and bring them back to their own land. He describes it as a valley of dry bones coming back to life. Impossible by any natural standard. Historians will tell you that no people group in the history of the world has ever been scattered across the earth for 2,000 years and then returned to reconstitute their nation in the same geographical location with the same language and the same cultural identity. It has never happened. Not once. Not to any other people in recorded history. Except once. In 1948, after nearly 2,000 years of exile, dispersion, persecution, and attempted annihilation, Israel became a nation again on the exact land described, speaking a language, Hebrew, that had been essentially dormant as a spoken vernacular for centuries and was deliberately revived. Secular historians who have no theological investment in this outcome still describe the establishment of the modern state of Israel as one of the most statistically improbable events in recorded human history. It happened exactly as written, 2,600 years later. Sign 1. Check. The second sign is one that Jesus himself described in Matthew chapter 24 when his disciples asked him directly, "What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" He did not give them poetry. He gave them a list. And the first item on that list was this: "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom." Now I know what you are thinking. There have always been wars. And you are right. But Jesus was not describing the mere existence of conflict. He was describing a specific pattern and a specific intensity. The word he used for nation rising against nation is the Greek word ethnos, which refers specifically to ethnic and national groups in conflict with each other, people groups fighting people groups, which is precisely the defining characteristic of modern warfare in a way that was not true of ancient warfare, which was primarily territorial and imperial. The 20th century alone produced 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the Korean War, Vietnam, multiple genocides, the Cold War, and a nuclear arms race that brought the world to the edge of annihilation on at least 3 documented occasions. The 21st century opened with September 11th and has not stopped since. As of right now, there are over 30 active armed conflicts happening simultaneously on this planet. Sign 2. Ongoing and accelerating. The third sign is one that sends a particular chill through me every time I look at the numbers. In Luke chapter 21, Jesus describes a sign that would precede the end, and he calls it pestilences, which is the ancient word for widespread disease, pandemic. For most of human history, this prophecy seemed self-evident, almost too easy, because disease was a constant feature of ancient life. But something changed in the 20th century. The development of antibiotics, vaccines, and modern medicine created a period of relative biological security that made pandemic feel like something from the past. And then 2020 happened. A virus emerged from a wet market or a laboratory, depending on which government you ask, and spread to every nation on Earth within weeks. It shut down the global economy. It killed millions. It exposed with brutal efficiency how thin the membrane of civilization actually is, how quickly the systems we depend on can buckle under pressure. And the scientific community is now in consensus agreement that COVID-19 was not an anomaly. It was a preview. The conditions that produced it, global travel, dense urban populations, zoonotic spillover from animals to humans, antibiotic resistance, have not changed. They have gotten worse. The next one, they tell us, could be significantly more lethal. Sign 3, documented and according to scientists, not finished. The fourth sign is one that the disciples would not have been able to imagine when Jesus described it 2,000 years ago, and yet it is now so mundane that we scroll past it without a second thought. In Matthew 24, Jesus says this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Think about what that meant in 33 AD. The disciples were 12 men in an occupied Roman province with no printing press, no radio, no internet, no satellite, no way to reach every nation on earth that anyone could conceive of. The idea that a message originating in that context would one day be heard in every nation on the planet was not just ambitious. It was by any rational calculation of that moment in history utterly impossible. Today, the Bible is the most translated document in the history of humanity. It has been translated into over 3,500 languages. Christian radio broadcasts reach into closed nations where possession of a Bible is a crime punishable by imprisonment or death. The internet has carried this message into living rooms and onto phone screens in countries that no missionary could ever enter. According to current missiological data, there is no people group on earth today that has not been exposed to the message of the gospel in some form. The thing that was impossible in 33 AD has been accomplished. Sign 4. Complete. The fifth sign is one that the ancient world did not have the technology to produce, and that our world has now had for decades, largely without stopping to think about what it means. In the book of Revelation, written approximately 2,000 years ago, the Apostle John describes a period during which the entire world will simultaneously witness a single event. He describes the whole earth seeing something at the same time. For most of church history, this prophecy was one of the most difficult to interpret because it described something that had no technological mechanism. How could the entire world see the same thing simultaneously? There was no answer until 1962 when the first communication satellite was launched into orbit. Today, a network of satellites covers the entire Earth. A single live broadcast can be watched simultaneously by billions of people in every nation on every continent in real time. The infrastructure that makes global simultaneous witness possible did not exist until the second half of the 20th century. It now exists completely. Sign 5. Infrastructure in place. The sixth sign is the one that I find most personally unsettling, because it is the one that describes not geopolitical events or natural disasters, but the internal condition of human beings. In his second letter to Timothy, the Apostle Paul writes a description of what people will be like in the last days. He says they will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Now I want you to read that list again carefully, not as a religious condemnation, but as a sociological description. Lovers of self. We live in the era of the selfie, the personal brand, the self-optimization movement, the culture of radical self-prioritization dressed up as mental health. Lovers of money. The gap between the wealthiest individuals on earth and the poorest human beings alive has never in recorded history been wider than it is right now. Boastful and proud. We have built entire platforms whose primary function is the performance of a curated self for the approval of strangers. Without self-control, we live in the most addicted civilization in human history. Addicted to substances, to screens, to stimulation, to outrage, to pornography, to the endless scroll of content designed by algorithms to keep us chemically hooked. Lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. We are the most entertained generation in human history and simultaneously the most anxious, the most depressed, the most medicated, and the most spiritually empty. Paul wrote that description in approximately 65 AD. He was describing 2024 with a precision that would be remarkable in a contemporary sociologist and is extraordinary in a first-century prisoner writing by candlelight in a Roman jail cell. Sign 6. We are living inside it right now. And now we come to the seventh sign, the one that is not yet complete, the one that is unfolding in real time, the one that I want you to pay very close attention to because this is the sign that everything else has been building toward and that the current news cycle is quietly, almost invisibly, assembling the pieces for without most people recognizing what they are watching. The book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, describes a coalition of nations that will gather against Israel in the last days. The nations described are referred to by their ancient names, but scholars have traced them with a consistency that is difficult to argue against. The nation referred to as Magog and led by a ruler called Gog is widely identified as Russia. The nation called Persia is explicitly Iran, which was known as Persia until 1935 when it formally changed its name. The nations called Gomer and Togarmah have been consistently identified by scholars as Turkey and regions of Central Asia. Ezekiel describes this coalition forming and moving against Israel in a conflict that would be unlike anything the world had seen before. Now look at the current geopolitical map. Russia and Iran have been in a formal military and strategic partnership since at least 2015. Their cooperation in Syria brought Russian military forces to within operational distance of Israel's northern border for the first time in modern history. Iran has publicly and repeatedly stated its intention to destroy the state of Israel and has spent decades building a network of proxy forces: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq, encircling Israel from every direction in a strategic formation that military analysts describe as a ring of fire. Turkey under its current leadership has made a dramatic pivot away from its Western alliances and toward closer relationships with Russia and Iran. These three nations, described by name 2,600 years ago as the coalition that would gather in the final conflict, are currently in the deepest strategic alignment they have been in modern history, and that alignment is deepening, not weakening, as global geopolitics continue to shift. The seventh sign is not complete, but the pieces are on the board. The players are in position. And the trajectory of current events is not moving away from the scenario Ezekiel described. It is moving toward it. Now here is where I want to stop and say something important. Something that I think gets lost in every conversation about end times prophecy, because these conversations so often become exercises in either fear or triumphalism, and I think both of those responses fundamentally miss the point. The point was never to frighten you. The point was never to give you a reason to disengage from the world or retreat into a bunker or spend your days obsessing over news cycles looking for signs. The point, the actual point, the reason Jesus and the prophets described these things in advance was so that when you saw them you would know. Not panic. No. Know that the story is not out of control. Know that the chaos you are watching on your screen is not evidence that nothing means anything. Know that there is a framework large enough to contain everything that is happening, and that the framework was written down 2,600 years ago by a man sitting in exile who saw something that his natural eyes could not have seen. The point was faith, not blind faith, not faith that ignores evidence. Faith that is built on evidence. Faith that looks at 6 specific things written thousands of years ago and documented as having occurred exactly as described, and says, if 6 of 7 are true, then I have a very serious reason to pay attention to the 7th. And if the 7th is in motion, then I have a very serious reason to examine what I actually believe about the one who wrote the list. Because if the list is real, then the one who gave the list is real. And if the one who gave the list is real, then everything else he said deserves the same honest examination that you would give any other body of evidence that proved itself this precisely over this long a period of time. This is not blind faith. This is the most reasonable response available to an honest mind looking honestly at the evidence. 6 signs. Documented, historical, verifiable, one unfolding in real time, and one name at the center of all of it that has outlasted every empire that tried to erase it, every government that tried to legislate it away, every intellectual movement that declared it finished. If you have been sitting on the fence, if you have been telling yourself you will think about these things later when there is more time, when life settles down, when you feel more ready, I want to ask you one question gently and honestly. How many of the 7 do you need before later becomes now? Leave a comment below and tell me which of these 6 signs hit you the hardest. Tell me where you are in your thinking, because I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Not to frighten them, to give them the same thing it gave you. A framework, a reason, a foundation that does not move when everything else is shaking. Subscribe because we are going deeper into every one of these signs in the coming weeks, and what is coming will go further than anything we have covered today. The list is real, the evidence is documented, and the one who wrote it is still speaking to anyone willing to stop long enough to listen.